had fallen on the Feudal Era. Not a sound was made, no birds chirping or bugs buzzing. Not even the wind was blowing. It was like the whole world was silent, because they knew that someone, somewhere, was extremely upset. Actually, the person in question was Kagome. She was mad. No, wrong word. The correct word to use in her case was livid. Livid at what had happened earlier. Sango and Miroku were sitting under a tree, eating the fish sticks Kagome had brought from her time, and were avoiding the 15-year-old girl, out of perpetual fear of what might happen to their ears should they try to talk with her. Even Shippo was smart enough to leave Kagome alone. Miroku had sworn he felt something akin to a demonic aura surrounding Kagome. But instead of evil, it was pure anger. The soon-to-be husband of Sango spoke up first. He knew what had to be done to calm the storm that was Kagome.
Guess we can rule out moving along in this journey until InuYasha decides he wants to apologize.
Leaning on his shoulder was the demon slayer Sango, who was finishing up her meal.
Speaking of InuYasha, where is he?
Kilala was on Sango's lap, resting, while Shippo stood against Miroku's leg, doing the same thing.
Last I checked, he was still digging himself out of the hole Kagome put him in with all those incantations. Man, I'd hate to be in that situation. And to think it was because he was hungry enough to eat her entire bag of food. Jerk.
Miroku nodded once and remembered why the tension was so high at the moment. No less than an hour ago, Kagome had come to the Feudal Era, to the Bone Eater's well like she normally did. She'd been acting extremely happy for some odd reason. Her bag looked as heavy as ever, and it didn't take long for someone to ask what was up. Kagome had acted like she was just waiting for someone to ask that question, and she immediately pulled out a red heart-shaped box.
Well, you see, back in my era, we have something called Valentine's Day.
More questions were asked, and Kagome was more than happy to answer.
Well, it's where lovers confess their feelings to the ones they care about most. They give out cards, candies, or other gifts to show their love. It's really a great day, and I've received a lot of chocolates from my friends at school.
Kagome had a lot of candy she had received, but she didn't want to have dental problems, and so she decided to bring them to her other friends in the Feudal Era, much to Shippo's delight. Kagome was going to distribute the chocolate evenly between those who wanted some. However, she had to go to Kaide's village to get some things. Unfortunately, the others had to do some minor things as well, and that left Kagome's bag totally unattended. Then InuYasha showed up and proceeded to eat the great majority of the contents of the bag. Unfortunately for him, Kagome was the one to find him stuffing his face with chocolates, and let's just say she unloaded on him with that all too familiar spell.
Sit, boy! Sit! Sit! Sit!
Miroku and Sango swore they heard his yelling from the village a mile away, with the impact of InuYasha's face hitting the ground echoing further than that. When they got back, Shippo was able to make out the form that was InuYasha, buried a good 6 feet underground, and Kagome fuming near the river's edge. Out of common sense, the others avoided Kagome while they made their dinner.
Oh look, it seems like he's finally gotten out of that hole.
Miroku pointed, seeing InuYasha all battered and bruised as he climbed out of his pit. He seemed to be unable to walk, and instead crawled to where Sango was sitting. Sango didn't feel the least bit sorry for him, since he probably never figured out how much Kagome took to prepare that chocolate for them, or the fact that he never asked to eat it in the first place.
Learned your lesson?
InuYasha growled.
I wasn't asking for a lecture! How was I supposed to know what was in her bag?
Shippo smacked InuYasha's skull with a stick. Normally, it wouldn't have hurt, but the half-demon had a headache the size of a mountain, and it hurt even more. But he was so sore he couldn't strike back. He howled in pain as Shippo poked him in the face with a stick.
Ever heard of consideration? You never even asked for permission to eat anyway. Now she's mad, and we're not going anywhere until you do the right thing.
Of course, InuYasha knew what he had to do, but he was stubborn, and he wasn't going to apologize.
Why should I say anything to her? She should have just taken her bag with her.
Typical.
Wanting to cut to the chase, he simply shook his head.
Okay then, if you want to continue in your life and not have Kagome hate you for the rest of her life, I suggest you either apologize or...
He stopped before he could finish his sentence. He saw that InuYasha's expression was different. His eyes widened with shock, and his lips curled into a dopey frown. Like what Miroku had said, fazed him considerably. Sango noticed it too, reminding her of the time when Kagome had said that InuYasha was exhausting to be around. The half-demon had taken it the wrong way, and thought she hated being around him at all. She decided Maybe you could use a hint on how to solve this problem.
Or maybe you could go and replace what you stole.
InuYasha shook his head to wipe the stupid look off his face.
What are you talking about?
Shippo crossed his little arms over his little chest.
That's easy, dummy. Just go and get some replacement chocolate to make it up to Kagome.
Sounds easy enough.
InuYasha stood up straight while ignoring his pain from earlier. Next thing everyone knew, they saw InuYasha take off like a shot towards the well. If everything went alright as Moroku prayed it would, they would see Kagome with a smile on her face, and they'd be moving again in the morning. If not, well, then InuYasha would have to be carried around for a week by the time Kagome was through with him. InuYasha went on through the well, and out into the modern era faster than he ever had in his previous ventures to Kagome's time. Of course, he had a game plan to follow, so he didn't have time to pat himself on the back. He needed to make Kagome happy again, and quickly for his sake, and hers. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, InuYasha went on to where he saw a lot of people shopping. Lines of stores with lots of red and pink stands selling all kinds of Valentine stuff were everywhere. He carefully scanned the area. He didn't want the others to know how hurt he was when he found out the sweets that Kagome had brought along were to be shared with everyone, and not just him. He felt like a real jerk. The sweet tooth had gotten the better of him, and he totally ruined it. So while he made it appear he didn't care, underneath his visage, he had tried to think of ways to make it up to Kagome. He didn't want her to hate him at all. But it was hard to please her, even under normal circumstances.
Now, to make it up to her, I have to get more of those sweets. Aha!
InuYasha dropped down into the crowd, remembering what Kagome had said about covering his dog ears to avoid attention, and went to the first stand to begin his personal mission.
Back in the Feudal Era, InuYasha had been gone well over an hour, and Kagome still sat near the edge of the river, still upset over his behavior earlier, at destroying her Valentine's gifts to her friends. Of course, she'd had a sneaking suspicion he'd mess up her plans in some way, but eating her chocolates? That wasn't one of them. Miroku and Sango tried to cheer her up by saying InuYasha had taken off to make it up to her, but she didn't want to hear about it. If it was a half-hearted attempt like he usually tried, then she'd sit him straight into the netherworld. Then maybe she could look past his grievance. But until then, she wasn't even going to give him the chance to redeem himself.
Hey.
Kagome knew whose voice was hovering behind her, but she didn't move.
What do you want?
Instead of a voiced reply, she heard what sounded like wrappers hitting the ground next to where she was sitting. The girl looked at what was dropping, and saw there was all kinds of candies and chocolates in a big pile. They looked like the expensive kind, too.
InuYasha, where did you...
Look, I'm sorry about earlier. I hope this helps for you not hating me anymore through your whole life.
He pulled out a small stuffed animal from the inside of his robes. It was a light pink puppy with big eyes. It was so cute. It was sitting and holding a large red heart in its paws that had X's and O's all over it.
InuYasha, I don't know what to say.
Well, you could just take the thing, and my apology, but that's only if you want it.
Well, that's great. He means it this time.
She smiled.
Okay, I forgive you.
She hugged the small stuffed puppy with her arms gleefully. But even with all the warm fuzzies in the air, she couldn't help but ask the one question everyone was dying to ask.
So, how did you get all of this in the first place?
Don't ask. Let's just say it was drastic and leave it at that.
He didn't want to tell her how he used his sword, Saya, to show off for some kids, and make them think he was some sort of superhero. Well, of course their parents paid him for his show. He would never do something like that again, even if his life depended on it. Well, maybe if Kagome threatened to make a sit pit again.